Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Conversations with Nikki and
Camille.
Yay! So we're actually on episode 4, and
Is it 4? Oh my
yes,
gosh, okay.
and I know you said you had something you wanted to talk about this particular week.
We changed subjects so much. I do want to. What did I just say that we were going to talk about? I so many things.
About letting go because that was something that came up, and I'll give my personal example later, but you want to get into it first?
Uh, we can. I mean, letting go. Oh my gosh, how does this affect almost every aspect of our being? I mean, I when we were talking about that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have a huge knot in my neck." And how do you let go of the tension, the stress, and whatever else is going on? And for me personally, I hold it, all of those things in my shoulders. So whenever I go into any kind of massage therapist, they're like, what is wrong with you? Why do you have this big boulder in your neck? Because it's so hard. Um, and so that brings me to one of the things that it was really difficult for me to let go of. And this is gonna get kind of deep, and it should be because maybe about 5 or 7 years ago, this shoulder, my right shoulder, I don't know which way you're seeing this, but this is my right shoulder. It was after I had a breakup, and after both my parents had passed, and after my brother had passed. And in a span, let's see how long, it was about 14 years that in that order, those people in my lives had passed away. So unknowingly, not really realizing that I was still holding on to grief. How did that affect me? This shoulder became frozen. So, two times in my life, I've had frozen shoulder. The first time was this shoulder, and I'm now finally releasing on this shoulder. And for those of you, we might have touched on this before, but sometimes when I actually went into PT to start therapy on this shoulder, they're like, "So, what kind of accident happened to cause your shoulder pain and for your shoulder to be frozen?" I said, "Nothing," because I knew it was energetic. I just didn't know what what part of me was blocking my shoulder to be lifted.
Mm.
And surprisingly enough, well, not enough, but surprising to me, my PT at that time, physical therapist, had mentioned that there's a lot of people who come in, mainly women, who come in with frozen shoulders, and they don't have any actual exercise or accident or incident that causes their shoulder to just not move any. Uh, and I was like, that's interesting. So I started thinking, okay, what part of me is creating me to not want to shoulder these anything in my life? So fast forward to when my insurance couldn't pay for it anymore, and I was just like, it wasn't covered. I decided to go to I don't know what method I don't remember the name or the type of massage it was, but it was an Asian type of massage where they walk on your back. I don't remember what it is, but it was pretty cool. The lady had the bar, and she would hold on, and then she'd walk on back. I was like, she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Oh," because it's her whole body on me, right? Except for she knows she's trained, right? And I went to her like 3 times, and every time I'm just like sobbing and crying. And she's like, "Are you okay?" Because no one really goes to massage and just sobs and cries. And I finally was thinking, I'm like, this is a lot of pain that I'm feeling like all throughout my body, like my calves, not only my shoulder and my back. And this was after getting more movement from physical therapy. And every part of my body was just in severe pain. And it just dawned on me, it's like, what pain am I holding on to?
Mm.
Because your body doesn't need to be that, like, you shouldn't be able to touch it and you go, ah, right? Like, so what is it? I had to really think. I'm like, there's nothing at work. I mean, work sucks, but what am I holding up? Nothing at work. So I really, really thought about it. And I was like, it's the death of all these significant people in my life that my body was holding on to because I did not properly grieve for them. I got so caught up in the, oh my gosh, this is happening. Like, my mom died first when I was in my mid 20s, like right after college. And then there was a break. Then my dad had some, because my mom's death, had health issues. And so there's just like this constant movement of all these big significant things happening. I didn't really have time to breathe because one thing happened. Okay, well, 3 days or 1 week or whatever a company will give you, and it's like it's never enough time. Everybody grieves in a different way. For me, I hold it in my body. And in our society, sadly, we're taught, it's like, okay, well, these are your bereavement days, and so this is all you have. You got to come back to work. And because we're still needing money at that time, whatever it is, you kind of go about back on your day and you grieve in a way you can, but really, you for me, I don't know about anyone else, but I was just stuffing it down because it was like, well, yeah, I got to go back to work. I got to, I got to do this. I got to do that. I don't have this. I don't have that. Literally the next year, my dad, same thing. It's like, oh my God, now what are we going to do with our dad? My brother, sister, and I are like, what do? Now we just lost our mom. We have to help figure out what to do with our dad. And then my brother, and now think about this, he's the oldest. He's now in a wheelchair because he can't handle all of this. Yeah,
Mm.
so all of this like energetic stuff, you really start to, if you're not able to express it, or you're not, I mean, really, if you're not able to express it, your body is going to show you you need to express it somehow. So it was after our dad was now in a wheelchair, my our brother is showing signs that his body is breaking down, and he's only 7 years older than me, only barely 2 years older than my sister. And we're like, what is going on with this family? um so all of these things are happening. We were trying to take care of our dad, who now stroke survivor, paralyzed on one side. My brother is now wheelchair bound. We're like, what the happened here? My sister had a miscarriage doing right before our mom died, and we're like, oh my God, like all of this just happening in a short amount of time. And when they tell you like things come in waves, like it came in a big wave for me. And so it was thinking back to all those times, and my brother was still alive, and then my brother passed. So it was after my brother passed that it was like, finally, is there something else that's going to drop? And ended the relationship with my ex-boyfriend. And so finally everything was like, oh my God, what else could go wrong? And then the shoulder was like, I can't, like thinking back to it, it's like, I can't shoulder any of this anymore, right? So when I'm down on the table with this lady just walking on top of my back, and I'm just like, oh my God. She's like, are you okay? I'm like, but I finally realized at that point in time, I was like, I have not grieved properly for any of the significant deaths in my family. And I just, every time I was on that table and with every painful step there was, I just sobbed like I should have. Again, it's, should have is not necessarily a word that people like to hear, but I was finally able to allow myself to grieve because I didn't realize I hadn't properly grieved or released the pain.
Mm. So would you say like I guess like massages can be healing as well as energy healing for those types of things? Or is there like a proper way to go about it whenever people hold on to things?
Well, we don't necessarily know that we're holding on to it, right? And that's where I believe this is where what you and I do and other energy healers do is that we find where it is and the literally the pain point, right? Like if you're looking at acupuncture, if you're looking at Chinese type of uh medicine, I'm not really gonna understand what it is. That's not my area of expertise. But I know whenever I go to acupuncture, they always say, "Oh, this point is for here." My current massage therapist, she does acupuncture and understands Chinese medicine, and she will always relate a point, which is I knew why this shoulder was. She's like relating this point to an emotion, and so for me, it was really important to find someone who truly understood that. So going back to my or what I was originally saying is that healers in different aspects, we're helping you out there release the pain that you didn't maybe understand you were holding in or didn't feel comfortable releasing.
Mhm.
Especially right now, I mean, there's a lot, like for me growing up, and I don't know again for any of you out there, we're always kind of slapped on the hand when any of us are crying, whether for whatever reason. It's like, don't cry, don't cry. Why are you crying? Because it hurts. And so when we're telling any little one or any adult, don't cry. I mean, they make jokes about that, right? It's like adults don't cry. It's like, so as a society, we are stuffing or telling people don't express your feelings. So what happens? If we're not expressing our feelings maturely, right? There's a way to be able to do it and not like, go wild, but we can still be able to express our feelings because we're hurt. I
Yeah.
was actually I had a discovery call that turned into an hour-long discovery call. I ended up just giving a healing, and it wasn't a huge healing, but I had this client kind of regress back to the first time she felt pain. And the amazing thing was just did really well. She remembered she was on her mother's shoulder and they were walking through a museum, and she was really little because the mom could still uh, hold her on the shoulder, and she was crying for whatever reason, and she remembers this, that her mom squeezed her fingers and said shh, like hush up, and however in whatever way she said it. And I said, so think understanding you now in this time, what can you remember your thoughts? Because this is the same, you're the same person. So you can connect back to you at that time and understand what thoughts and what feelings you're feeling. She's like, well, the first thing that's coming to my mind is like, why did my mom hurt me? Why would someone that I love and I know loves me hurt me? I was like, oh my God, that's, and she was surprised too. I'm like, so the things that we're doing as adults to kids, even though we're not verbal, we interpret it in different ways. So this is where we're having at now, at in these times, you're trying to undo all the things that we experienced, because at that time we didn't necessarily understand what was going on. We didn't have the bigger picture. We're not verbal enough to know how to express our feelings except for crying.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your example because I know, grief is a big one for a lot of people. And for me personally, I remember, and you're right, like we don't know we're holding on to it. So I remember when I got a healing session and I was like, I don't really know why I'm thinking about my karmic relationship. It's been like 3 years and it's always at the forefront of my mind, and I have nothing to do with this person anymore. And when we actually got into it, it was guilt. I still felt guilty about cheating on my husband with this person because I needed the love at the time and I thought I was going to get it there. And I didn't. And at the time, it didn't process as guilt. At the time, it was like, oh, I'm getting my needs met. Like I feel good. I guess afterwards, when everything happened, like everything passed, and I started my healing journey, and it was really healing the heart and like the parts of me that needed the love. Like, where did that originate from? That came from my childhood where I needed the love and giving that back to myself. But I never healed the guilt that I felt for that particular incident. And so after that healing, and this was a timeline healing with Addison, and he's like, do you want to close the timeline? Should we leave it open? Should we just like store it away? And I was like, close it. I was so quick to say close it because there was a lot of shame behind it, right? And he's like, well, there's a lot of great things that happened in that timeline. And I'm guided to not close it. I'm guided to leave it open. And he's like, well, but you have free will, so you get to choose. And I said, close. I said, close it. And he was like, are you sure? He asked again. And he's like, maybe you want to ask your guides for guidance. And I asked my guides, and they were just like, it might, we visualize things that give us an interpretation of what our guide said. So I visualize my guides are like, to you.
Yep,
I
free
was
will.
like, and I sat there and I thought about it and I was like, okay, you know what? Like, just leave it open. Like, just leave it open because it's a time period. It was like a time period of 2 years. And there's a lot of things that happen in those 2 years. There's good things and there's bad things. And when we experience those emotions that we can't express or let go of, it's the bad things stay in the forefront and we never get to remember the good things. And it's the same with like childhood healing. Like I've done so much mother wound healing that I only remembered all the horrible things that she said and all the all the times where I didn't get to be myself and I didn't get to express myself, that one day I did get a healing and my intention was I want to be able to connect that bridge, to be able to maybe one day like meet my mom without feeling triggered, and all the small memories of the acts of service that she's done, because she wasn't good at expressing emotions, so it was like acts of service that expressed her love. Oh my god, I just started bawling because that was like another healing moment. Like I remembered the times that she did love me versus being in a traumatized state. All I remembered was the bad stuff, and it was like, oh, this is her fault and that's her fault. So that's just like another example that we don't know that we're holding on to these things. And
Yeah.
it's a sign if it is showing up, like where does it hurt? Or for me, it was like a thought. Like this thought comes up all the time, but why? Right? I haven't talked to this person in over 3 years. Why is it still there? Like this is annoying. Like I want to move on with my life.
Moving on. And so again, like when you feel like you want to move on and you can't, and I'm not going to say that talk therapy can't help you on that part, but sometimes you're we can go deeper. So Addison is a healer that both Nikki and I have had the pleasure of having sessions with, and I'm amazed at his modality that he learned and is doing right now, because I am doing timeline session healings as well. And I'm going back to things I was like, oh, I'm probably going to be like most people and just go back to our time, like our world, Egypt. Last time I had a Babylonian timeline that I got to heal. I did not close. And I went to a time frame where I was carrying some kind of goddess energy from an Egyptian time as well. I was like, what the hell? And then my first time that I had a session with Addison, I'm going back even further. He's like, well, you did mention that you felt like you were a star seed. He's like, would you like to understand which system? I'm like, which system? What do you mean? So I'm healing. I go back through a number of timelines, and it's all from one particular um galactic area. And he's like, well, we could choose this one or this one. Which one do you want to choose this time? I'm like, I guess this one. He's like, okay, well, if this one comes up the next time, we can do that one. And he's explaining to me how even further beyond our concept of time here in human life, because this is now pre-Earth.
Oh my
What?
God. You're like an old soul from a different origin, like originated elsewhere. That's really cool and really interesting because I know for my timeline, I only did 2 sessions. So mine was focused on ancestral wound because I wanted to get that abandonment wound like gone. Because I was told, and now I'm starting to understand a little bit about how trauma manifests into the physical world. But like I remember getting a psychic reading and this was from Adrian when but she doesn't do psychic readings anymore. And she was like, yeah, I see in your future you're gonna cheat on your husband again, and this time there's gonna be like a child involved. And I was like, no, I don't want that. And she's like, yeah, well, you gotta heal an abandonment wound. And I sense that it's like ancient. And so I was like, oh, I hate this. I don't like this. So um I was like searching far and wide for any healer that can heal abandonment wounds. And I healed it, but it went back 30,000 years. And that was like
I remember when you told me that. I was like, 30,000 years? What?
you're like that's pre-civilization. Like human civilizations didn't even form back then.
That's why I was so confused. I was like, what are you talking about?
And literally the image that I got was like a Tarzan. It was like Tarzan in the middle of nowhere in a barren desert. And that was the conceptualization of how I felt back then, or how my ancestors felt back then, that they were all left alone in barren land, nobody around them. So as we were healing it, all of a sudden the landscape started to flourish with flowers and trees, and people started popping up. And that's how you know like something is being healed, when your visuals, well, I see visuals, you see visuals as well, other people experience feelings and stuff, but for me I saw visuals and I was like, oh, I'm starting to see like greenery and life and everything. And it's like, yeah, that's you healing it. Or you can even go back and when you heal these things, you can play rewind. I was like, that was for me healing the guilt thing. I actually went back to when I met this karmic relationship, and it went in reverse. Like everything went in reverse, and then when it played forward, we just never met. Like we just went our separate ways. But it's not to say it didn't happen. It was just energetically we kind of healed our own timeline in that sense.
That's really cool. I Now that I've been going through my own sessions, I understand. I was like, yeah, this is pre-Earth. Like, what? Um, one of the things that I don't necessarily always get visions. Sometimes I hear, and so I actually hear things. And when um when the timeline was being healed, I heard one of the songs from The Little Mermaid. I was starting to laugh because he's like, "What are you laughing at?" I'm like, "Well, I'm hearing a song from Little Mermaid from when Ursula had granted the wish for Ariel to become a human, and it was that
Mhm.
and he's like, really? So I'm singing through my healing. Um, and he's like, you should just listen to that sometime this week, or when you feel like you're not transforming, because this is a transformative time for you, because you're choosing to go all the way back to whatever time frame this is. And I don't pretend to even understand because the time frames, as like, I understand up to certain human times, and before that I don't. It's a bunch of numbers.
Really? Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really pay attention. I was talking to a friend of mine. I was like, history is just not one of the things I paid attention to in school. It all just runs together because it's like it doesn't pertain to me, but maybe it does because of past lives.
That's interesting. Yeah, I was not one for history either. I was leaning more towards like psychology. Like psychology was so easy for me. And now I understand why, because due to trauma, I study behavior of people to predict how they will act or how they'll, react so that I can be safe in my environment. So we're trained from the start. Like if you're a healer, if you're whatever, like your life experience trains you in whatever fashion you were meant to go on anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Is a few of my mentors, they my one of my last teachers mentor, she kept talking about her personal journey and her personal trauma, and it was, and I was like, I am thankful, very, very thankful that I did not choose to be a victim of physical abuse. So I was like, whew, skip that one. I'm like, I'm pretty sure in different lifetimes I chose that, but I did not choose that this time. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, for me, it's mainly emotional stuff too. And when I look at my birth chart, it's like the things that I'm really good at, right? Is emotional transformation, uh, life, like death and rebirth. And that's a Scorpio thing, death and rebirth.
Yeah, when um I remember I had an astrology chart read, my birth chart. And this is before I knew really anything. And I don't pretend to understand astrology. It's so cumbersome, so I will always ask for a reading. And I remember asking, when am I psychic? And they're like, yeah, really psychic. That's all they could say, really psychic. They're like, based on all of your whatever the terminology is, it's like, you're really psychic. Don't worry, it's coming. And I just said, and at that point, I was just starting. really, really starting my journey of energy healing. I had taken a couple classes, but I was one of those people. I was like, well, I want to do that. 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 I had not taken Michael's class yet. And
Mm,
Michael, when I say Michael, Michael Sheridan of Ashley Dream Interpretation. And it was when I took his class and was introduced to Elizabeth Rose and Anne and all these wonderful people and Heidi and Bruce um, and April that and aside and Susan aside from the people that were in my class and we were able to pick apart from the dictionary that he said he's going to update soon um how to understand how our higher selves are talking to us and how we what it is that we're supposed to heal so that we can bloom into our spiritual journey.
I
So,
always thought it was funny because he attracts all the angel channelers, and I was like, that's and I didn't know any of my spiritual gifts before then either. I just went through the healing course with Adrian. So I was like, okay, I know I'm a healer. That's all I know right now. And so when I did go through Michael's dream course, the funny thing is, I went in there thinking like, yeah, his specialty is healing childhood trauma. And I didn't, but my motivation was like, what are my dreams are going to tell me about my spiritual gift? And then every week he would tell me, your dreams are telling you this happened with your mom and you need to heal it. And I'm like, boo. I'm like, tell me about my spiritual gifts. Um, so why don't you share a little bit about like what your dreams said your gifts are and how that's actually showing up for you right now?
oh gosh, so I'm supposed to remember. Oh gosh. So one of the most significant dreams that I remember having was, and I can't remember if it was before this class or during the class, but it was almost like Avatar, where I was scaling or climbing up this this cliff. I was climbing up a cliff. So kind of imagine like Mission Impossible whenever Tom Cruise character is on some kind of impossible thing and he's scaling up a wall. I didn't have any ropes or anything. It's just me just bare hands, bare feet, just just climbing up this huge cliff. And then I remember just taking a dive, like just diving back like this and then diving straight into water. And I remember going, because in my dream, I could feel me breaking the water and feeling the coldness of the water. And I was like, what the hell? And so as I went into the water, I was just diving deep, 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 deep into the like to the bottom of the ocean. And it was there. I woke up and I was like on a perch, but it was an area where I could see below me. I was dry. Almost I want to say almost like Atlantis. And um and so when I woke up, I was in different clothes and I could see over this ledge and I could see all these different animals that were it was like a cityscape and all these different animals were going through the streets, kind of like Zootopia. And I never watched Zootopia. It was only after that I was like, that's like my dream. But there were all kinds of animals. And I remember going straight into like I it was like I flew right to like a corner cafe where I saw two humans, like kind of like MIB, like Mission Men in Black. And they were sitting in the cafe and I was sitting in there with them. But I was like, and this is where it ends because I don't hear anything, but I can see everything around me. I can even like, if my drawing skills are a little bit better, I could draw like where I landed and where I woke up because I had a blanket on, a bed. It wasn't. covered. It wasn't like a hotel. It was just an area that, like a cave like area, because it was rocky, and I just looked over and I could see a cityscape. Um, and he was like, that means that you're deep diving into your spiritualism. And I said, well, what about the people? He's like, you're not ready. I think he was telling me that I can go in between all the different worlds, which is true.
Oh.
Which is true, because when I was first taking, and again, like I had no idea I was doing this when I was taking my class with Lorraine. Hi, Lorraine. Um, we were doing our regression so that we could release all of our issues that were holding us at anything. And so during that time, we were brought into a slight meditative state so that we could still be conscious and be able to see what where we landed in our mind. So we would practice on each other, our um my fellow students and I, and we would pick on something that was bothering us. So let's say I'll say my foot again. And so we would go back to a time where, well, what's the time frame and blah, 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 blah. So we do this regression. And one of it brought me to a time where I was like a fairy.
Mm.
So opening up that gift, opening up the regression opened up my channel to be able to go in and out pretty quickly, because we had to go in and out. And I remember practicing with my classmate a lot, because this is something that was so cool to all of us. We would practice on the weekends, and I remember she had to help me get into that mindset to be able to channel.
Mm.
But it was a lot of practicing to be able to get from there to there. But at that time, I had to have someone bring me into that meditative state. And that took me a while to be able to do that myself, because I relied so much on someone else. But once I got into that state, I could get to different realms. And so when I was able, when I took, fast forward a few years, when I took Michael's class, I was like, oh, so that's why I can go into different worlds. But really, fairy realm was the realm that I easily went into.
Cool. And was that the only thing that, well, I know more, your gifts have expanded so much more. So, you want to explain like what your spiritual gifts look like now, how they come through during healing, who you call upon during healings?
So one of the gifts that Michael recognizes that through my dreams is that I'm a hands-on healer, which I think because of the pandemic changed. So right after I took Michael's class, the pandemic happened. And so I didn't really have an opportunity to practice um, hands-on healing, but I had already had my Reiki classes. So people, whenever I would work on people, they could definitely feel, even, and with Reiki, you can do long distance. So you don't have to be in the room. It's just, you just are able to feel the energy. Um, and so since taking his class, I've just been able to hear, like my clairs have come in even more. And
Mm.
oftentimes when I call in, I always call in Archangel Michael. He's my go-to person, or being, not person. He's my go-to being. And from that point, I can hear in my mind's ear what other beings are coming through. I think the most trippiest one, it was during last week or a couple weeks ago, the unicorns came through.
That's a surprise to me because I remember getting a healing, the first experience of healing, or the first one that I can consciously remember because it was just so out there. It was like you called the trolls and the fairies and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, these are mythological creatures. Like, do they actually exist? And then it was undeniable that your healing worked because you opened up another, you connected me to the angel realms, which is like a much higher frequency than I was at before. And I was like, okay, she's onto something. Like she's got something. She might be crazy, but she's got something.
I'm just a little crazy, not fully crazy, just right brain crazy. And I'm convinced now because the funny thing is, so when I'm getting a healing, I would always say, but I don't know if I can get a healing because I mean, I know it works because I will go into Delta and during it, it didn't matter if it was my any one of my teachers, my energy teachers, I'll be clear about that, or getting a healing, I would go into Delta, and right before the healing ended, I would start to come to, and I was like, what happened? Like, how long has it been? And they're like 45 minutes. I was like, what the hell? Like, it didn't matter if it was whatever meditation, my left brain would say, this just does not compute. Right brain, this is all your stuff, but I'm shutting everything down. And it makes sense because when I'm channeling, I'm in full right brain mode. And there's no way I think I was talking, I forgot who I was talking about. I was like, so if you and I were just having conversation, just like we just had here, Nikki, I was like, oh yeah, remember when I said that unicorns are just giving you some powder and remember your magical self, and to remember that, I'm going to give you some powder so you can have it in your pocket. That's when you tell people are crazy. But when I'm in my full right brain channeling, it is so not crazy. It is vivid as this computer, and you are on this screen to me right here. It is so vivid in my mind that I see this unicorn saying, we are here to help you, humans. And so you can remember that you two are magical. We're going to give each of you some of our unicorn magic, and you're going to keep it in your pocket. Remember this pouch, it's in your pocket.
Oh, it's good of you to say that again because I don't consciously remember that part. But I know that I have a dragon now, so
Yes, yes.
and I never even thought that was possible. So that's really cool. And
Yeah,
I
I mean, like
remember,
all those cartoons, all those, sorry, the animated uh the animated movies or however they call it now. I still say cartoons. How to Train Your Dragon. Maybe you need to watch that.
there's some truth in all of the myths and stuff. It existed at some point. We just don't see it now. But now through energy healing and things like this, it's being called forth because ever since you started talking about dragons, I've seen every other healer on my Instagram feed, like dragon this, dragon conference, calling in the dragons. I was like, oh, what is this?
And I remember listening to a healer conference, symposium, whatever they were talking about, and they were mentioning that the dragons are coming back because they were part of the original beings to help start Earth, and they help put the crystals in the earth. And I think that's why that it was after, shortly before we had or it was channeled through me for whomever was in my class, and Nikki was part of it, um to meet your dragon, and the dragon was going to give you their crystal. So whoever was part of that group healing, they got to meet their dragon and got to see the crystal that was given to them. So one of, again, like going back to one of the things, the abilities that has allowed me to grow is it really is about remembering all the spiritual gifts that we have. They've been blocked by all of this 3D and things that people don't want us to understand, that we have our own inner power. And one of the things that really comes to me is whenever I hear things now, or if I'm experiencing a healing that really resonates with me, it becomes a remembering. And anyone who is having a session with me, and if it pertains to them, it will come automatically through.
Mm.
But I'm gonna say it's for those who are ready and for those who it pertains to, because it is, if it doesn't pertain to them, then the light beings aren't gonna come.
Yeah. And that was something important that we had talked about because a lot of people think like, so, like you mentioned, some people have gifts from the beginning, some people block their own gifts, and then other people need to remember how to recall their gifts. And it can't just be like, oh, activate me. It's like there's healing that needs to be done to get to that point. And I know I'm in channeling now, and I'm really starting to just like understand when I'm in a channeling state, because I've channeled before during healings. I just never knew I was channeling during healings, and now I know I'm actually channeling because I'm being like Michael instructs us on how to do it and he'll test whether we're connected or not. And it's what a month or 6 weeks in now. So, and it's just coming slowly. It's not, and even before then, we had 4 weeks of solely healing any past life blockages that was preventing us from connecting to our channel in the first place. So that goes to show like not all gifts come through like this. It's like some have to be activated, some need to be healed in order for us to connect to it. And like for you, going through the regression opened up that connection to get to these other realms.
But also the constant practice of me having to go back and forth, because
Yeah.
if that was only 1 or 2 sessions, then, and without practice, like again, like my classmate and I, we would call each other, can, like, because we had worked so close, like the vicinity of us working together was so close, um, that we would just text, hey, you want to practice tonight? Sure, I have time, because I didn't have a boyfriend anymore. She was single too. So we were both single. She had just broken up right before my ex and I had broken up. So we had a lot of time.
What a
And
good way, right? It was like now
yeah.
you got to refocus your life in a new direction. But I also want to mention like not all gifts have to be uh, like psychic or telepathic or anything like that. Because I know for me, like what came through was I brought gifts from past lives where I was like a monk, and in that lifetime as a monk, I wrote. I like wrote on scribes and everything like that. So in this life, I'm a really, really like avid, like I don't write stories, like I write emails and they resonate with people and people tell me it resonates with them. And it's because that skill I got from a past life. It was transferred over. So if you think in this life, like, oh, I'm a really great artist, or I'm a really good cook, or I'm really good at this particular thing. And it's like, well, maybe you brought it over from a past life and you're meant to utilize it. So just
Mhm.
knowing like you're really good at writing and you're meant to utilize it because it came through from a past life. Now I'm like, okay, that gives me validation to write because I was so afraid that people wouldn't like my writing or that I'm too emotional in my writing or what. All these stories that we have, we're not good enough, that we're silly, that's too intense, it's too much. And it's like, no, this is your divine expression of who you are and what you're meant to bring into the world.
And we have to remember too, when someone tells another person that, it's their opinion. And gosh, I keep hearing it over and over, and I forget the originator of who said this is, but this keeps getting posted or said. Your opinion of me is not none of my business.
Ah, yes. Oh my goodness. And I said this about emotions too, because growing up in a environment where like my mom was very reactive to my emotions, and so I made it my duty to not right step on eggshells. So I would be stepping on eggshells to make sure that she's not triggered by me. And that's just to protect my own emotions because when she's triggered, I'm triggered too. And now, going through the healing process, when somebody doesn't respond to me the way that I want them to respond to me, it's none of my business. Like, I don't make it my business. I'm like, I'm fine with my answer. And this is how I want to show up. And these are my boundaries. If you don't like it, that's not my problem. Like,
Mm-hmm.
whereas before I would be like, oh my God, she doesn't like me. Like, what can I do to change myself and my boundaries to fit her story, or for what she wants so she can love and accept me. And
Mm-hmm.
every time I did that, it would be neglecting my own needs. And that's how
Yes.
all these, conditions start to form. That kind of frequency builds and it manifests into your reality where you don't get the opportunities that you want because you kept denying yourself in the past, or you
Yep.
get triggered by certain things because you kept allowing yourself to not step fully into the role that you want to be in or the boundary that you want to set.
Or you were just not right. It's allowing too many people to, it's more about not understanding how much worth you are, not understanding your own self-worth, and not putting up, like you said, those boundaries so you understand what your self-worth is. Everyone understands how worthy you are because that's why they're coming to you, they're using you, they see the light that you are. And if you can't see your own light and you're not putting up those boundaries, so you're not just freely giving and never getting anything back, right? It's that, also that saying of filling your cup. Are you filling your cup, or is it constantly empty because you're giving too much?
I had actually said that same quote yesterday because I was trying to explain to somebody why accepting like a monetary energetic exchange was acceptable to me, but doing something out of the goodwill of my heart and not really accepting something didn't feel right at the time. Um, and she's like, well, aren't you just taking a bribe then? And I'm like, because you already didn't want to say yes to that opportunity. And I said, no, because now I feel like there's a fair energetic exchange and I'm okay with that. But if I don't and I allow this person to keep taking and taking and taking from me, and I'm not actually giving it out of the goodwill of my heart anymore because I have nothing left to give, like my energy is depleted and I don't want to do that, then and people feel guilty about that, from childhood, if you don't give your parents what they want and all of a sudden it's your fault. And well, that's my experience, take it as you will.
Yeah.
um and I used to feel guilty about that, like, oh, I should be nice to them and I should extend
Should.
these things, right? Like I should extend even though I don't want to. It's the nice thing to do. And it's
Mhm.
like, that's not, just because you have firm boundaries doesn't mean you're not nice. It means you're taking care of your own energy first and you give out of the excess if you can.
So, but when you're talking about that, so there's this Friends episode that popped into my mind where um Phoebe and and Rachel, um they are not making money yet. They are, like, I think Rachel is still a coffee, working at the coffee shop, and then Phoebe isn't making as much money as a massage therapist, but then everyone else, oh, and oh my gosh, Matt LeBlanc, his character Joey, he hadn't made it big yet as an actor, and but Ross has his high paying professor job. Monica has her great chef job, and then Chandler did whatever he did, whatever his job was. They never really said anything what he did. Rest in peace, Chandler. Um, but I know I'm just going everywhere. But so there's and I remember this pretty well because I remember experiencing this. So the three of the characters, um, Rachel, and Phoebe were like, we shouldn't have to pitch in like $40. We just had soup and you all ate like kings. Why should we do this? And so when they finally put their voiced their opinion and why they how they couldn't actually afford to freely give because the other people were understanding that they didn't have the means, then they're like, well, why didn't you tell us before? But if they hadn't voiced it, if they voiced it before and didn't assume, people, we all assume things, but we need to really set the boundaries and say, no, I can't, no, I won't, or I don't have to. This is where our free will really needs to come in. And we really need to understand, no, I'm overextended.
Mhm.
I don't need to abide by what they say, I'm saying I don't want to.
Yeah, and it's okay. And if people don't like you for that, then that's their prerogative, and you don't have to feel bad about it.
I'm like, bye, Felicia.
Exactly. I used to do that too because I boundaries was such a lesson for me. Boundaries was such a hard lesson for me because I just never had boundaries when I was younger. And the same thing pertained to me. Every time we went out, I'm like, I haven't made it yet. Like, I'm buying the cheapest entree that I see at this restaurant, and everyone else is like, oh, I want a $40 filet mignon or like $60 thing. And then at the end, they're like, split the bill. And I was like, oh, hell no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not splitting my bill. I had a cup of soup. It
And
was $3.95. You have $40. I'm not splitting $3.95 and I am not paying. No.
on top of that, I didn't drink alcohol. And, when people go out, it's social drinking, and drinks are like $21. I'm like, are you crazy? No, I'm gonna have my happy ass water. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, boundaries. We'll split the check, please.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I did also want to bring up another thing when we were talking about opportunities or like feeling worthy of of taking up space, right? Because I had my client this week. She was like, I feel really triggered because I finally have the dream job that I want, and they're asking me to take a leadership role, and it's like everything I want, and they recognize me. And this is something that she's been struggling with, is that people don't recognize her gifts. And she's done all this healing, and people are finally recognizing her gifts, and she's finally in an environment where people value her. And then all of a sudden, that conditioning comes in. Well, I don't want to take this girl's place. Like, I don't want to step on her toes because we were friends before, and she even invited me to her house. And I and it was like that conflicting. Like, if I accept this position, then I just put someone out of theirs. And I said, you've been asking the universe for this opportunity. You've been asking the universe to recognize your gifts, and they recognize your gifts, and they're putting you in a position of leadership because you want to be recognized as a leader in your field. And the way you can reframe this is, she if you're doing yourself a disservice, but you're also doing the company a disservice because they need somebody to have the skills that you do to run that department. And if you don't take it, somebody else is going to replace you, or somebody else is going to replace that role anyways. But also, every single person has their own unique gift. If the person who was already in that role that didn't have that gift, she would be better off somewhere else where her gifts are going to be recognized. Like, the universe is just creating space, right? To her, in your perception, wounded perception, it seems like you just kick someone out of their home. When in reality, it's like her gifts and her skill set, it's a blessing from the universe. She's meant to go into another department, or she's meant to do something else that's going to nurture her gifts because she's not comfortable in a leadership role where she doesn't have the skill sets and you do. And so each person is a piece of the puzzle and each person fits in their own unique piece of the puzzle. So no one's actually losing anything. It's just a redirection from the universe. And when I said it like that, she was like, that makes so much sense because I felt so much guilt. But again, all these guilt, all the story, all the way that we see and perceive life comes from conditioning of, well, somebody made me feel guilty for actually shining brightly.
Mm. Oh, girl, yes. And that can also come in a different way as well. Like unfortunately how I experience people just want to backstab you because they want your job instead of politely, um saying you're a great leader. But I had like two people tell me that I was actually a really good manager, and other people that were, that I managed, they were backstabbing me. And I only knew this because my other coworkers were like, don't you know they're trying to kick you in your ass? I was like, what? They're like, yeah, they come in here as if they don't understand that we're your friends. And they come in acting as if they were in your shoes, but they don't know. They don't have the experience. I was like, interesting. So I there's a few ways where people want, if you're not ready to accept your position and you're not understanding that you are in the position that you deserve, people are going to try to, if they can sense that you're not as confident, they're definitely going to try to get you. But that's also, they can sense that you're not comfortable as well. That's why they put you there. It's an energetic thing. I realized that. I was like, because I want to say that it's in all places, but it's not. It's not. It's an energy that I was still carrying. That people.
We see that, like you're saying, like it's a mirror, right? Like they're just mirroring back to you how you felt. So like if they're backstabbing you, you probably felt a little insecure at the time about your position in the role.
Mm-hmm. Even though I did feel like I was the person, but I I remember the person that I had taken over, and people were telling me that that person I had taken over was not competent. So I don't know if I was in that energy as well.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, that's in the past.
I mean, but it's all relevant, right? We all experience this in different ways in whatever role that may be, whether it's in personal relationships or professional relationships. It's always what is your environment showing you and where are you getting triggered by it? Because I know my client, like we did a healing on her because there was one coworker who was talking smack about her and her job and how incompetent she was. And she's a new chef and blah, blah, blah. And she can't do this and she can't do that. And she felt so triggered by it because face to face, they're all like, oh my God, I love your hair, whatever. But then behind her back, she's like off telling the manager, oh, she can't do her job well. And
Oh,
she felt so triggered by it. And after we did a healing, because it was her sense of self-worth, like where did she feel inadequate? Because right, and recognizing when other people talk about you, that's how they feel about themselves, like the insecurity they feel about themselves, they have to bring you down in order to make themselves feel better.
yes, that's
So
a good toxic. Ooh, girl. A lot,
so
lot of stories from that that past that past profession.
yeah, and it was so amazing to see the shift immediately because right after the healing, like a couple hours later, she had to go to a company party. And at the company party, her old story was, nobody likes me or nobody appreciates me for me. And I have to try so hard. And her initial response was like, maybe I'll talk to this girl again and see why she has beef. Maybe I just don't understand her. And I was like, it's not that, you overcompensate for when people don't like you because you want to be liked so bad. Instead, you don't want to focus your energy on people who don't like you. You just want to focus on people who do appreciate you. So after the healing, 3 hours pass, she goes to the company party. She meets coworkers that, she's never met before, but in this company party, she's meeting them for the first time. They love her. They totally get her. They understand she's on her healing journey. They're on their healing journey too. They invite her over for Thanksgiving. It was like, and this other girl trying to scooch her way into the conversation. Yeah, I want to talk about that too. And she wasn't triggered or anything. Like nobody paid any attention to her because her energy is now redirected. Like I'm not trying to seek attention from people who don't like me or who don't appreciate me. I actually have people who like me because I like me, right? Like I like me.
Mhm.
So I'm going to attract people who like me. I'm not even going to pay attention to those who don't.
Yeah. And that was, I call those people learning. That was my learning friend.
I know this because I used to get triggered by all of those things. And it was just
Who
weird.
out there is not triggered?
But also, your core need is to want to be liked, right? I think everyone wants to fit in to some extent because that's just a survival. That's the way to
That's just how
survive. Yeah.
it, we ride in packs. We are social, right? Like, look at how social you and I are. I think you're probably one of the, after my boyfriend, I talk to you the most, and we're at literally at the opposite ends of the
Of the
US.
states.
I'm in Seattle, she's in Florida. I mean, if I was in Hawaii, that could probably be the most for this or whatever. But in the continental US, we could probably be the furthest from each other. And
Yeah.
I talk to her the most.
And I also want to put, that if you feel like you don't find your people, it's because you haven't stepped into your own role. You haven't stepped into a role big enough. I used to feel that way. Like, oh, none of my friends are entrepreneurs, or like none of the people I know at work are entrepreneurial spirited, and nobody understands me. Like, I'm driven, I'm motivated, I want to do big things with my life. Everybody else is happy where they are. And then as I kept, investing in programs, I kept meeting people who are at the same level, at the same energetic frequency. Like they want to invest in themselves, they want to do all these amazing things too. And I finally found people that get me. But I kept rising, of course. It wasn't just an entrepreneurial thing. It was like now I meet healers, and now I meet people from like other, intergalactic other souls and other lifetimes. And it's like, because this is where I need to be. This is where my energy has always wanted to be. When I allow myself to keep rising and rising and rising, then I met my soul tribe. I met you, and we talk like all the time. Whereas before, nobody understood a damn thing I was saying. So I just kept my mouth shut.
So people are amazed. Like the rest of the universe, my boyfriend is clueless as to what it is. My boyfriend and my family, and maybe my family might be listening to this, but they are clueless as to what it can do. But at the same time, it's like I am completely independent of them. They are my blood family, but they're not necessarily my soul tribe.
Yeah. I can say that what's with us super spiritual women like hanging out with guys that are like not like my husband's not. I think he's spiritually embodied as a person because his values are very rooted in the core concepts of love, compassion, like integrity. Like he has such high integrity and morals and things like that. But in terms of like fairies and angels and stuff, he's like, yeah, don't talk to me about that. I don't really know. You
Yeah,
do you, boo.
same. But then, yeah, my boyfriend plays a video game that has trolls,
Ah,
that has elves, fairies, I don't know what other kind of beasts that have dragons. I was like, well, I see dragons. He's like, ah, and he's like, oh, you make up stuff. I was like, maybe.
I told my husband, I was like, babe, guess what? Like, I just got told I'm an angel. I'm from the angel realms. And he's like, yeah, I don't really think that. He's like, you're not very angelic to me. And I'm like, but I'm a human right now. That's why.
It doesn't matter because, like you said, like for me, my boyfriend is here,
Yeah.
right? This is how I found him. That he met, I was talking to a friend of mine. He met my list. He came out of the list I made when I wanted to create. I wanted the person to be with my partner. He came out of that list. So that is why, like, seriously, when I met him, after I realized, I think it was after I had finally broken up with my ex and I had met him for the second time. I was asking, do you remember the first time we met? He's like, no. I was like, I remember. And it wasn't like we met. It was I was there preoccupied with my coworker at that time. And we were talking about stuff that was bothering me at work, but he was his teammate.
Oh.
Yeah. And then a year later, I ended up playing on a different team, but on the same night that he was playing. And then, like, seriously, I remember this as like I was walking into the bar. This is billiards, and I was like, and I was like, it's you. It's like it, like literally, like my eyes, like I think I yelled it or said it really loudly in the bar, and he was like, yeah. But at that time, I wasn't focused on meeting anyone, but my heart was telling my brain and my body is like, this is the person. And I had only met him one time. All we said to each other, we didn't say anything to each other. I just sat and I'm like, hey, like that's it. Because I was so involved in talking to his teammate, my coworker, and I even saw my other, like my previous ex there and like my old teammates. So it was like he was new. I remember him, but I never talked to him.
Mm.
But then the next time, like almost a year later, I had my heart had mended and I had already been focusing, manifesting this person, and I had already met him, but it hadn't come to fruition yet. Like we both hadn't understood that. And then my chase began. It
Oh.
wasn't like my chase, it was like having him recognize that we were supposed to be together and here we are.
We'll do another episode on relationships. It's a fun topic. For now, let's wrap up. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with today?
No, no, I said a lot. I know we're
Yeah.
ding 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 ding. I'm
All right.
like a ping pong ball. Not ping pong, pinball.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Camille, for being on this weekly podcast with me.
Oh, I love it. I wouldn't have done it with anyone else. How long did it take you to finally say yes?
Oh, Camille's the chaser. She's been planting the seed in my mind, and I'm like, no, no, it's a lot of responsibility. I don't want to do it. And look at us, we have so much fun now.
I
I
know.
have to stay up past midnight sometimes, but we'll do. We got this. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.